Picture this. The year is long before electricity, long before central heating, long before insulated jackets, flashlights, and GPS apps that can warn you of an incoming storm. The land before you is endless. Sweeping plains, dense forests, towering mountains. The temperature has plummeted far below freezing. The snow is thick, heavy, and relentless. Night falls earlier and earlier, and when it does, the darkness feels absolute. There are no city lights, no glowing thermostats, no hum of electric heaters to offer comfort. Just silence, broken only by the howling of the wind. For most of us today, such conditions would feel impossible to endure without modern technology. But for the native peoples of North America, this was life. It wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in one of the harshest natural environments on Earth. And here's the astonishing part. They did it with no modern gear, no insulated fabrics, no generators, no convenience stores stocked with supplies. Instead, they relied on knowledge. Knowledge gathered over generations, tested by trial, sharpened by necessity, and passed down through stories, practices, and traditions. Think about it. Every culture develops hacks to deal with its environment, but the Native American winter strategies were in a class of their own. They had to deal with sub-zero nights, blizzards, frozen rivers, and the constant challenge of keeping not just one person alive, but entire communities. Children, elders, hunters, and healers. Every solution had to work, and it had to be sustainable. And so they developed methods that are still, to this day, astonishing in their ingenuity. They discovered how to insulate themselves using animal hides so effectively that modern clothing companies now mimic the same designs. They built homes like tipis and longhouses that breathed in the summer and trapped heat in the winter with almost perfect efficiency. They devised food preservation methods that meant even when the land seemed barren and the rivers frozen, families could still eat. They created snowshoes, toboggans, and other tools that turned frozen landscapes from obstacles into highways of survival. What's even more incredible is that many of these winter hacks can still be applied today. Survivalists, outdoor adventurers, and even scientists studying passive heating and insulation are rediscovering the power of indigenous methods. In an age where we depend heavily on fragile supply chains and fossil fuel energy, there's a powerful lesson to be learned here. Humans once lived in balance with winter's extremes, not in fear of them. Let's not forget the communal side of survival. Winter wasn't faced alone. The knowledge of how to light a fire quickly in snow, how to build shelters against icy winds, how to share warmth through clever design. All of it was part of a larger web of community resilience. These weren't just hacks in the modern sense of quick fixes. They were ways of life, deeply rooted in respect for the environment. So in this video, we're not just going to list tips and tricks. We're going to journey into a world where survival meant listening to the land, learning from animals, and working with, not against, the forces of nature. We'll uncover 10 forgotten Native American winter survival hacks that reveal an astonishing level of wisdom. Hacks that prove you don't need high-tech gadgets to endure the cold. You need knowledge, creativity, and respect for the world around you. By the end, you may find yourself looking at your own winter gear differently. You may even walk away with ideas that could help you in a real survival situation, whether it's a camping trip gone wrong, a sudden snowstorm, or simply the inspiration to live a little closer to the rhythms of nature. So get ready, from ingenious insulation techniques to tools that conquered snow and ice, from food storage secrets to fire-making genius. Here are 10 forgotten Native American winter hacks that put even our modern gear to shame. If you were standing on the Great Plains in the dead of winter, the wind biting at your face and snow crunching beneath your feet, survival would depend on one thing above all: staying warm. Without warmth, nothing else mattered. Not food, not shelter, not fire. And for Native Americans living centuries before synthetic jackets and heated boots, the answer was found in the skins and furs of the animals around them. Animal skin insulation wasn't just clothing, it was science applied through observation. By watching how animals themselves survived the cold, tribes learned to mimic nature's design. Buffalo, elk, deer, and rabbit were not just sources of food, but of life-saving insulation. A buffalo's thick winter hide, for example, provided an outer layer so dense that snow would settle on top without melting, proof of its insulating power. When worn as robes or cloaks, these hides became living blankets, capable of keeping body heat trapped even in sub-zero temperatures. But insulation wasn't about simply draping a hide across your shoulders. The secret was in layering. Thin deer hides worn close to the body, softer and more pliable, created a breathable inner layer. On top of that came heavier buffalo or elk robes, layered like an ancient version of our modern down jackets. The combination worked in the same way as today's base layer, insulation layer, outer shell principle. Only here, the materials were natural and biodegradable, perfected long before outdoor clothing companies turned it into marketing. Accessories also played a crucial role. Rabbit fur, with its fine softness, was often used to line moccasins or gloves, protecting hands and feet, the body parts most vulnerable to frostbite. Hoods and fur-lined head coverings preserved precious heat, recognizing that much of our warmth escapes through the head. And woven straps or ties kept garments snug against the body, preventing cold air from seeping in through gaps. Beyond simple warmth, these garments were designed for mobility. Hunters, warriors, and travelers needed to move through snow, stalk prey, or defend their families. Heavy, stiff clothing would have been a burden, so hides were tanned, softened, and tailored for flexibility. Elk and deer skins were particularly valued for this, creating leggings and tunics that allowed movement while still providing warmth. In some regions, waterproofing methods, such as smoking hides or rubbing them with natural oils, added an extra layer of protection against snow and sleet. And yet, this wasn't only about practicality. Clothing carried meaning. A robe might be painted with symbols of dreams or spiritual visions. Feathers, beads, or quills might adorn the edges, blending survival with artistry. To wear such garments was not merely to fight off the cold, but to carry culture and identity even in the harshest weather. Every stitch, every tie, was an expression of both necessity and beauty. The power of animal skin insulation also extended into bedding. At night, families wrapped themselves in buffalo robes layered over soft hides, creating warmth equivalent to modern sleeping bags. Children were swaddled in furs, their breath visible in the cold air, yet their bodies secure in the cocoon of natural insulation. In some cases, heated stones were wrapped in hides and placed near bedding, turning robes into radiant heat systems that lasted through the night. What makes this hack astonishing is how it foreshadows modern science. Today, survivalists know the key to staying warm is trapping air between layers. Air pockets retain heat, and the more layers, the more warmth. Native Americans already mastered this principle centuries ago. Their clothing wasn't bulky guesswork. It was precise, functional design that used layering to regulate body temperature. And let's not overlook sustainability. Nothing was wasted. After a hunt, meat was eaten. Bones were shaped into tools, sinews into thread, and hides into clothing. These garments were renewable, repairable, and biodegradable. Compare that with today's synthetic jackets, which may keep us warm, but leave behind plastic waste that lingers for centuries. In many ways, animal skin insulation wasn't just effective, it was environmentally perfect. So the next time you zip up a parka or pull on insulated boots, remember this. The principles keeping you warm were not invented in a lab. They were discovered on frozen plains, in snowy forests, by people who understood the rhythm of the land and the wisdom of animals. Layer by layer, hide by hide, they wrapped themselves not just in clothing, but in survival itself. Imagine sitting inside a teepee in the dead of winter. A fire crackles at the center, its warmth radiating outward. The flames are life itself, cooking food, providing light, keeping the cold at bay. But fire brings a challenge: smoke. In a sealed space, it could suffocate. In an open space, it could let precious warmth escape. The solution? Smoke flap engineering, a forgotten but brilliant system that worked hand in hand with the teepee door. At the top of the teepee, two triangular flaps extended from the hide covering. These weren't random cuts, they were carefully positioned and controlled with poles. By adjusting them, families could manage exactly how smoke and heat moved. Tilt the flaps inward and they trapped more warmth. Angle them outward and smoke vented smoothly into the sky. It was a simple, elegant system, but also highly adaptable. In winter, when warmth mattered most, the flaps could be lowered just enough to let smoke escape without losing heat. In summer, the same flaps could be opened wide, turning the teepee into a ventilated shelter with constant airflow. The door below acted as the intake vent, while the flaps above became the exhaust. Together, they created a natural chimney effect that modern architects call the stack effect. This system gave the teepee a unique balance. Fires burned cleanly, without filling the interior with smoke. The air stayed breathable, and the temperature inside remained surprisingly stable, even when blizzards howled outside. No matches, no thermostats, just an understanding of how air moves when guided by design. What makes this hack even more remarkable is its efficiency. In an era when we burn fuel endlessly to heat and cool our homes, the teepee used the smallest amount of firewood possible. The smoke flaps conserved energy, ensuring heat wasn't wasted. And because the materials were all natural, wood, hide, sinew, the system left no trace on the land when the teepee was moved. It's worth noting, too, that the smoke flaps were part of daily life. Adjusting them became a skill passed down through families. Children watched their elders angle the poles just so, learning when to trap warmth and when to release smoke. Survival wasn't about machines. It was about knowledge. And knowledge was shared. So the next time you see a picture of a teepee with its distinctive flaps open to the wind, don't just see decoration. See a marvel of environmental engineering. The smoke flaps weren't crude improvisations. They were part of a sophisticated system that turned the teepee into one of the most efficient portable dwellings ever created. In winter, survival wasn't only about warmth, it was about food. The land could become barren, rivers froze, and hunting grew scarce. Yet Native Americans had systems in place to make sure their families stayed nourished, even through the longest, coldest months. Their food preservation hacks were ingenious, sustainable, and centuries ahead of what many modern households practice today. One of the most effective methods was drying and smoking. Meat from buffalo, deer, or fish was cut into thin strips, hung on racks, and smoked slowly over low fires. The smoke not only dried the meat, but infused it with compounds that resisted bacteria and mold. Once finished, these strips could last for months, providing protein long after the hunt. Some tribes even mixed dried meat with fat and berries to create pemmican, a high-energy, long-lasting food that served as both emergency rations and daily fuel for hunters. Another strategy was freezing. In regions where temperatures plunged, natural ice and snow became allies. Fish, berries, or meat could be stored in frozen caches, often buried beneath snow or in pits lined with insulating materials. This was the earliest form of refrigeration, requiring no electricity, only knowledge of how to protect food from scavengers while keeping it cold. Grains, nuts, and dried corn were also stored with care. Tribes built underground caches or used woven baskets sealed with natural materials like pitch or clay. These storage units kept supplies safe from moisture and pests, ensuring a steady source of carbohydrates and nutrients when fresh food was scarce. Food preservation wasn't only practical, it was communal. Hunting parties brought back more than one family could eat, and the surplus was shared, dried, or stored for winter. This sense of collective responsibility meant no one was left to starve when blizzards made hunting impossible. The brilliance of these hacks lies in their simplicity. No chemicals, no plastic packaging, no artificial refrigeration. Just fire, smoke, air, snow, and skill. And yet, they worked so well that explorers and traders who encountered indigenous food preservation often adopted the techniques themselves. Pemmican, for instance, became a staple for fur traders and Arctic explorers centuries later. For us today, the lesson is powerful. We often rely entirely on grocery stores and freezers, assuming they will always be there. But native peoples show us that survival is about preparation and ingenuity. With a little knowledge, food can be preserved naturally, sustainably, and effectively, even in the harshest winter. So when you think about survival in the cold, remember, warmth may keep you alive through the night, but food preservation keeps you alive through the season. And the forgotten hacks of Native American tribes turned every harvest, hunt, or fishing trip into life insurance for the months ahead. Winter survival wasn't just about staying warm and fed, it was about staying mobile. Deep snow could trap the unprepared, turning a simple journey into a deadly ordeal. But Native Americans devised clever tools that transformed snow from an obstacle into a pathway: snowshoes and toboggans. Snowshoes were an ingenious adaptation of nature's own designs. Just as a lynx or snowshoe hare survives by distributing its weight across wide, furry paws, Native Americans created footwear that spread a human's weight over a larger surface. Frames made of bent wood were laced with rawhide, forming a lightweight but strong web. Instead of sinking into deep snow, wearers glided across the surface, able to hunt, travel, and carry supplies where others would struggle. Different regions developed unique snowshoe styles. In the dense forests of the Northeast, shorter, more rounded designs allowed for maneuverability among trees. On the open plains or in northern territories, longer snowshoes helped cover wide distances more efficiently. Each design reflected intimate knowledge of the landscape, proof that these tools were not one-size-fits-all, but tailored survival gear. Alongside snowshoes came the toboggan, a long, narrow sled made from thin, flexible wood. With no raised runners, toboggans could glide smoothly over deep snow or soft powder, where European-style sleds would bog down. Pulled by hand or with dogs, they carried heavy loads: meat from a successful hunt, firewood for long nights, or even supplies for entire families. Together, snowshoes and toboggans turned the frozen world into a highway. Hunters could pursue game across snowy fields, families could relocate camps, and trade between groups continued, even when winter tried to shut everything down. These tools were not luxuries. They were lifelines. What's striking is that the same principles still apply today. Modern snowshoes and sleds look remarkably similar to their indigenous predecessors. The designs worked so well that they've barely needed improvement in hundreds of years. It's another reminder that survival knowledge doesn't always come from new inventions. Sometimes it comes from paying attention to the land and learning from it. For Native Americans, snow wasn't a barrier. With the right tools, it became a bridge, one that carried life across the frozen wilderness. Fire was more than warmth. It was life itself, for cooking, protection, light, and morale. But in the depths of winter, with snow falling heavy and wood soaked through, starting a fire could mean the difference between survival and tragedy. Native Americans mastered techniques that allowed them to kindle flames even when everything seemed frozen and wet. The first secret was in material choice. Dry wood was rare during storms, but not impossible to find. Tribes knew to look inside dead trees, beneath thick bark, or at the heartwood of fallen logs, where moisture hadn't fully seeped. Resin-rich woods like pine were especially prized because even damp pieces could catch a spark when shaved into curls. Then came the tinder bundles. Dry grasses, shredded bark, cattail fluff, or even fungus from tree trunks were gathered and protected inside clothing to keep them warm and moisture-free. Hunters often carried small pouches of this tinder, knowing that without it, no spark would survive. To create the flame itself, methods varied. The bow drill and hand drill, friction-based fire starters, were widely used, requiring skill and stamina but providing reliable results. Striking flint against steel or iron pyrite produced sparks that, when caught by the tinder, blossomed into fire. In some regions, tribes carried glowing embers from one camp to the next inside special containers, ensuring that fire was never completely lost. But survival in winter wasn't only about technique. It was about preparation. Fires were often built on raised platforms of logs or stones to keep them from sinking into snow. Windbreaks of hides or brush shielded fragile sparks until flames grew strong. And once burning, fires were carefully tended, fed with smaller dry pieces first before moving to larger logs. Modern survivalists know how difficult it is to start fire in wet, freezing conditions. Yet for Native Americans, it was a daily reality. Through observation, preparation, and practice, they turned firemaking into both a science and an art. It's a reminder that survival doesn't come from gadgets alone. It comes from knowledge, the kind passed down across generations, where every spark was not just a flame, but a victory against the cold. When temperatures plunged and the wind howled outside, survival wasn't just about hides, fires, or tools. It was about people. Native Americans understood a truth modern survival experts still emphasize. The body itself is a furnace, and when shared wisely, that heat could mean the difference between life and death. Inside a winter shelter, whether a teepee, longhouse, or earth lodge, families gathered close. Beds of furs and hides were laid thick on the ground to block the cold earth. Children slept nestled between parents or elders, ensuring that no one was left exposed to freezing drafts. In larger structures like longhouses, multiple fires burned along the central aisle, and dozens of families shared the space, pooling both fuel and body warmth. This wasn't just practicality, it was culture. Winter was a season of gathering. Stories were told, songs were sung, and traditions were passed down while people huddled near the fire. Survival and community blended seamlessly. Heat wasn't just shared physically, but emotionally, strengthening bonds while strengthening resilience. Even travel made use of this principle. Hunters caught in storms would often share cloaks or furs, crouching together under makeshift windbreaks until the danger passed. By pressing close, they reduced heat loss, mimicking the way animals like wolves survive cold nights in packs. The shelters themselves were designed for this. Teepees, with their circular layouts, kept everyone within reach of the central fire. Earth lodges, partially sunken into the ground, insulated large groups, turning the very soil into a shield against the wind. Snow itself could even become insulation. Piled around the base of a teepee or lodge, it sealed gaps and trapped warmth like nature's own blanket. The lesson is clear. While modern survival often focuses on gear, insulated jackets, thermal sleeping bags, electric heaters, the greatest resource in the past was each other. Communal warmth wasn't just efficient, it was life-sustaining. So, when you imagine a Native American family enduring a blizzard, don't think of individuals shivering alone. Think of circles of people, firelight flickering across their faces, bodies pressed close, voices sharing stories. And together, making the coldest nights not just survivable, but bearable. When modern people think of insulation, we imagine fiberglass, foam panels, or synthetic materials packed into walls. But for Native Americans facing harsh winters, insulation came straight from the environment itself. Snow, earth, and bark, the very elements of the land, became powerful tools to keep out the cold and trap in warmth. It might sound strange to call snow an insulator, but anyone who has ever built a snow cave knows how effective it can be. Snow traps air in its crystalline structure, creating a natural barrier against wind. Tribes living in snowy regions use this to their advantage. They piled snow around the bases of tipis or earth lodges, sealing cracks where icy drafts might creep in. Rather than freezing them out, snow became a protective layer, turning shelters into warm cocoons. Earth was another ally. Many tribes of the plains and woodlands built earth lodges, dome-like structures partially sunk into the ground. The soil itself, thickly piled over a wooden frame, acted like nature's insulation. Once heated by a central fire, the lodge retained warmth remarkably well, staying comfortable even during blizzards. These lodges could house dozens of people, their sheer size made practical only because of the insulating properties of earth. Then there was bark. Stripped carefully from trees like birch, bark sheets became lightweight yet durable wall coverings. Birch bark wigwams, for instance, were surprisingly weather-resistant. When layered, bark kept out rain, blocked wind, and added insulation to shelters. In winter, bark could be combined with hides or additional coverings to strengthen its effect. The genius here lies in the adaptability. Snow was temporary, melting in spring. Bark was renewable, harvested with care, so trees survived. Earth was abundant, molded into walls that could last for years. Nothing was wasted, and everything served a purpose. For us today, this is more than a curiosity. Modern architects study earth-based insulation and passive heating for eco-friendly homes. Snow, earth, and bark remind us that the environment isn't always an enemy in winter. Sometimes, it provides the very tools for survival, if we know how to use them. Fire and shelter could keep the body warm, but without the right fuel, even the strongest person would wither in the cold. Native Americans understood that winter survival demanded more than full stomachs. It required foods and medicines that provided strength, stamina, and resilience. Their winter nutrition strategies were as ingenious as their shelters and clothing. The first principle was high-calorie diets. In the bitter cold, the body burns energy faster to maintain core temperature. To meet this need, tribes relied on nutrient-dense foods like dried meat, pemmican, and rendered animal fat. Pemmican, in particular, was a survival superfood, a mix of dried buffalo or deer meat, tallow, and dried berries. Lightweight, portable, and packed with calories, it could last for months and provide steady energy during hunts or long journeys. Animal fat was highly valued, not just for cooking, but for survival. Consumed in small amounts, it offered long-lasting fuel that kept the body warm. Unlike lean meat, which could actually lead to rabbit starvation when eaten alone, fat provided the balance needed to endure harsh winters. But food was only part of the picture. Herbal knowledge played a critical role. Tribes harvested and preserved plants long before the snow arrived. Cedar and pine needles brewed into teas provided essential vitamin C to ward off scurvy, a risk in winters when fresh plants were scarce. Sage, mint, and willow bark offered medicinal relief for coughs, fevers, and aches, ensuring that illness didn't weaken the community during the hardest months. Even in the dead of winter, nature provided hidden resources. Hunters knew where to find marrow in animal bones, a nutrient-rich source of fat and minerals. Foragers sought out inner bark from certain trees, which could be dried and ground into emergency flour. Every calorie mattered, and every part of nature held potential. Nutrition wasn't just physical, it was cultural. Shared meals, soups simmering over central fires, and herbal remedies passed from elder to child were part of winter's rhythm. Food wasn't only fuel, it was a bond of survival and tradition. For us today, the lesson is striking. We often rely on processed foods and supplements, yet here were communities thriving on natural, balanced, high-energy diets that sustained life through brutal conditions. The body was fueled not by convenience, but by wisdom. Wisdom written in every berry, every bone, every brew of cedar tea. When most people see deep snow and thick ice, they think of obstacles. Frozen rivers that block passage, snowdrifts that bury paths, and water locked away, undrinkable. But for Native Americans, snow and ice weren't just challenges. They were tools. With the right knowledge, the very things that made winter dangerous could be transformed into resources for survival. The most obvious use was water storage. Snow and ice were nature's reservoirs. Instead of searching for flowing rivers in the dead of winter, tribes collected clean snow, melted it over fires, and stored the water in containers of hide, wood, or clay. It wasn't always easy. Melting snow alone could require a lot of heat, but with patience and technique, it provided safe drinking water when streams and lakes were sealed under ice. Ice also became a way to preserve food. Just as we use freezers today, indigenous families learned to cache meat and fish in icy pits or frozen ground. The cold acted as a natural refrigerator, slowing decay and protecting supplies from scavengers. By carefully sealing these caches with bark, earth, or snow, food could last deep into the season, ready to be retrieved when hunting was scarce. Snow had another use: insulation. Packed snow around a shelter or storage pit created a temperature barrier, preventing sudden thaws from spoiling supplies and keeping the cold steady and predictable. Snow caves and snowblock windbreaks could also serve as emergency shelters, providing warmth that open air never could. And then there was cooling control. During early thaws or spring transitions, chunks of ice were sometimes kept in shaded pits, covered with bark or hides. This primitive ice storage extended the usefulness of winter's freeze, ensuring fresh supplies stayed edible longer as temperatures fluctuated. The ingenuity here lies in attitude. Where others might curse ice as a barrier, Native Americans embraced it as an ally. It gave water when rivers froze, preserved food when hunting slowed, and even helped build shelters. Snow and ice, instead of being enemies, became partners in survival. For us today, it's a reminder. Survival isn't always about resisting nature. Sometimes, it's about learning how to work with it. And in winter's coldest grip, the frozen world itself became a toolkit in the hands of those who knew how to use it. Surviving the winter wasn't only about staying warm and storing food. It was also about finding fresh game when supplies ran low. For Native Americans, hunting in winter demanded skill, patience, and a deep understanding of how animals behaved in the snow. What might seem like a barren, silent wilderness to us was, for them, a landscape filled with clues. One of the greatest tools was the snow itself. Fresh snowfall revealed tracks of deer, elk, rabbits, or even predators like wolves. Hunters became experts at reading these signs, not just identifying the species, but judging the animal's size, speed, and direction. A deep print might mean a heavy, slower-moving animal, while lighter prints suggested swifter prey. Disturbed snow, broken twigs, or scat along a trail painted a story of where the animal had been and where it might be heading. Winter also changed animal behavior. With food scarce, many animals moved in predictable patterns, visiting the same feeding areas or sheltered valleys. Hunters used this knowledge to set traps or ambush points. Silent movement was key. Snowshoes spread their weight, allowing them to glide across deep snow without loud crunching, while fur-lined clothing muffled sound. Another strategy was driving game. In groups, hunters worked together to guide animals toward waiting archers or into natural enclosures. Snow and terrain were used as allies, funneling prey where hunters had the advantage. Fishing, too, continued in winter. Ice holes were cut into frozen rivers or lakes, and lines or spears brought up fish when land game was scarce. This added vital protein and variety to diets otherwise limited by the season. And always, the hunt was balanced with respect. Animals were not taken carelessly. Ceremonies and rituals often accompanied hunting, acknowledging the life given and ensuring sustainability. This mindset ensured herds remained healthy for future generations, a form of conservation long before the word existed. For us today, these strategies are astonishing in their precision. Where we rely on GPS trackers, rifles, and modern gear, native hunters relied on observation, teamwork, and patience. The snow wasn't just a challenge, it was a map. And with every print, every shadow, they found the clues that meant survival. We've just walked through 10 forgotten Native American winter survival hacks, from animal skin insulation and smoke flap engineering to snow travel tools, fire starting skills, and hunting strategies. Together, they reveal a truth that's easy to forget in our modern world. Survival doesn't depend on gadgets or technology alone. It depends on knowledge, creativity, and respect for the environment. Think about it. These communities faced winters harsher than most of us can imagine. Blizzards, freezing nights, endless snow. And yet, they endured, not by fighting against nature, but by working with it. Snow became insulation. Ice became storage. Hides became life-saving clothing. Even fire, fragile and fleeting, was controlled with such mastery that it warmed families through the longest nights. What makes these hacks so powerful is not only that they worked, but that they continue to inspire. Modern survivalists still carry pemmican. Architects still study passive airflow designs. Snowshoes and toboggans remain nearly unchanged from their indigenous originals. This isn't just history, it's living proof of timeless wisdom. And here's the bigger message. The past still has lessons for the future. As we face challenges like climate change, energy shortages, and the need for sustainable living, these ancient strategies remind us that humans already learned how to thrive without modern conveniences. The answers are out there, written in the practices of those who came before us. If this journey opened your eyes, if you found yourself picturing a teepee glowing against the snow, or imagining hunters gliding silently on snowshoes, then there's so much more waiting to be discovered. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Tap the bell to get notified when the next story drops. And share this video with someone who loves history, survival, or simply wants to see how human ingenuity has always found a way. Because the story of survival is never finished. And together, we'll keep unlocking the wisdom of the past, one forgotten hack at a time.